Erskine and Helen's residence, which it once was, or even an office, which it used to be, or a display of African American history at the Van House, I think of the people who worked in this building, and we honor three of them today. And it's appropriate that France got this started because what he didn't tell you was that for many years, every Sunday afternoon this time found him at the Van House. That was his day. And we solved lots of the world's problems in this cabin back then, if people would only listen to us. And you've heard from Connie, who I always introduce her as the first friend of the Van House. Long before there was an organization called that, Connie was here doing things for us. And some other folks who were around, Jeff Stansel sent his regrets, but for some reason he thought it was more fun to babysit his two grandchildren this afternoon than drive over the mountain to come see us. Another former employee from that era is here, Gene Underwood, over here. He worked here 2 different times, and we thought he might come back someday now that he's retired also. And another special guest today is she has more different memories of this cabin than anybody, I guess, because as a little girl she spent the night with her Grandma Helen here, and then came to get money from Daddy when she was a teenager and needed money to go fill her car up. And then she was back for some of our special program. That's Sandra Hall Brown. Wave at it. And as far as Ed and Pat goes, one of the first things I learned here was how to answer the phone. And that was Van House Historic Site, may I help you? But depending on what the person on the other end said, affected how we responded to their question. If somebody called and wanted to talk to Lard, well, that was just real cool. We knew that was one of his childhood friends. And we could say, no, he's on the golf course. Or he went to town for coffee or something. If they called and wanted to speak to Ed, well, that was probably a family member. And let's just say he had instructed us, some of them he didn't want to talk to at all. If they asked for James or Mr. Hall, we knew that was somebody from the state, and we'd better say, he's out cutting grass right now. And he would, if he were here today, he always said, he helped raise me at the Van House, and he did. They were like another set of parents. And with Pat, one of my favorite stories was I was already teaching, but I was across the road at the old high school in Bagley. France was across the road at the new high school. And Pat, he came over and said, Tim, Pat's called, she needs us at the Van House. And Lard's gone. She doesn't know what to do. The alarm's going off, she can't get to stop. So we came over, Pat was just beside herself because the sound was enough to drive you crazy anyway. And it'd been going so long, so we finally just had to, and we didn't tell the state employers, we just unhooked the wire and got it to go off. But one of the third person we honor today was already memorialized here, and that was Arminta Swilling, who always worked, and her last job was here at the Van House. At an age when most people were more than content to stay at home and piddle in the garden, Arminta was actively, as she called it, hunting work in her 70s. She loved piddling in the roses and irises she planted here and added to them. She loved to give tours of the Van House, and her favorite phrase was, I want to call your attention to every piece of furniture in the house. Whether they cared or not, they heard about it. And when she and Ed were both here, I've seen Pat many times do this because Bart learned to whisper in a sawmill. And Arminta was far more deaf than she would admit. And when they were both in the room, oh, and to hear them close the door of the Van House, it was just overwhelming many times. But Arminta was faithful to every duty. One time when we set off the alarm, she couldn't remember the security code, and finally she said, "The boat, the boat, the boat." We're not like Fantasy Island, the plane, the plane, the plane, the boat. And that will tell some of you what the security code was. Joe Van's boat. And Arminta was simply heartbroken when retirements took her best friend away from her. But she stayed on here almost until her death and never knew that some of the kids who came to work here sometimes referred to her as Armina instead of Arminta. She had no children, and all her immediate family are gone. So I'm glad we can still remember her here where she worked and enjoyed so much time. And I'm glad we got to do the marker. And they're filming this for Pat. That's the only thing that could make the day better. Pat could have been here. Because France and I were talking not long ago. We would never tell a lady's age, but she's still as beautiful as she ever was. So, how bad? So, thank you.